My name is John Ellis. I'm 49 years old, and up until recently I thought I had a pretty standard life. Maggie and I had been married for almost 18 years. We met in our early 30s, that golden moment when you're just old enough to know what you want but still naive enough to think love alone can carry you through anything. We had 2 kids, Tyler, 16, with the quiet intensity of someone who sees more than he says, and Ellie, 9, a bright beam of innocence in a world that sometimes feels anything but. Over the years, our marriage went through its natural cycles: love, routine, frustration, forgiveness. I won't pretend it was perfect, but we built a life. We were partners. Or so I believed. That particular week in October, Maggie had flown out to Seattle for what she called a full-on slate of project meetings. She worked in strategic communications for a firm that often partnered with tech companies, which meant periodic travel. Normally, I'd think nothing of it. She'd done this before: pack a small bag, kiss the kids goodbye, and vanish into a blur of client meetings, hotel rooms, and late-night conference calls. But something about this trip felt different. It wasn't anything big. Just small things that didn't sit right. Like how quickly she booked it without talking to me much. Or how vague she was about the itinerary. And how, the night before her flight, she barely looked up from her phone. Tyler asked her something about his math class, and she didn't even hear him. That wasn't like her. And it sure wasn't like us. I'm not the jealous type. I've never been the guy who checks his wife's texts or keeps tabs on where she goes. But that morning after she left, I stood in the kitchen pouring coffee, watching Ellie pack her little purple backpack, and I felt this pull, this tight knot of unease that I couldn't explain away. Later that day, on pure impulse, I called into work and took a personal week. I didn't even have a solid plan yet. All I knew was I needed to see her. Not just to check up on her. To surprise her. Remind us what mattered. Maybe I'd been distant lately too. Maybe we were both guilty of letting time stretch too far between the moments that mattered. I thought if I brought the kids along and showed up at her hotel, we could reconnect. I imagined her face lighting up, Ellie running into her arms, Tyler giving that half smile of approval he reserved for rare moments. I imagined laughter. Hugs. Maybe even a night out like old times. So I booked 3 last-minute tickets to Seattle. The kids were thrilled. They thought it was an adventure. I didn't tell Maggie. I wanted it to be a surprise. That was the whole point. We landed in the late afternoon, just before the city lights came alive. Seattle in October has this damp, gray kind of beauty. The sky feels heavy, like it knows secrets it isn't telling. As we rode the taxi to the hotel she'd mentioned, I watched the kids out of the corner of my eye, Ellie with her nose against the window, Tyler pretending to be annoyed but clearly curious. The hotel wasn't fancy, but it was modern. Comfortable. We checked into a room 1 floor below hers. I'd gotten the info by calling the front desk, pretending to be her husband trying to send flowers. A small lie that didn't feel like a lie at the time. I told the kids to wait in the lobby. Ellie was content with a tablet and some fruit snacks. Tyler gave me a look like he knew I was up to something but didn't ask questions. He's always been like that, reads people better than he lets on. I took the elevator alone. My heart was thudding, but not in a bad way. More like anticipation. Excitement. I really believed this was going to be one of those movie moments where the tension breaks and everyone ends up smiling. When I got to her floor, I walked slowly down the hallway. I saw her room number 822, just past the ice machine. I stopped for a second outside her door and took a breath. I don't know why I hesitated. Something inside me felt off. Like my body knew what my brain didn't. I knocked. At first, silence. Then faint movement. A shuffle of feet. And then I heard it, a low male voice. Talking. Laughing. It was muffled but close. Definitely inside the room. I froze. My stomach clenched like I'd been punched. The laughter didn't match anything businesslike. I tried to tell myself maybe it was the TV. Or a colleague. She'd mentioned meeting with a team, hadn't she? Before I could process any of it, the door opened. And there she was. Maggie. My wife. Her expression went from confusion to shock in less than a second. Her eyes widened and she pulled the door only halfway open, as if trying to block the view behind her. Her hair was messy, not unkempt, just in asterisk mate. She wore an oversized gray hoodie I didn't recognize. It looked like it belonged to someone else. Someone bigger. John, she said, blinking. Oh my God, what are you doing here? I couldn't speak at first. My gaze darted behind her. Someone moved in the background, a tall silhouette, bare chest, shirtless. The man walked casually across the room and disappeared out of frame. I caught a glimpse of a wine glass on the nightstand. The bed wasn't made. Maggie stepped into the doorway, trying to pull the door closer. It's not what you think, she said quickly. We were just I had my colleague on speaker. I wasn't expecting. She stopped. Her face was flushed. Her hands fidgeted with the sleeves of that damn sweatshirt. I nodded once, but it wasn't agreement. It was disbelief trying to anchor itself as logic. I wasn't ready to make a scene. Not yet. Not in a hallway with carpeted walls and too many listening ears. Okay, I said quietly. That's all I could manage. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I turned away and walked back to the elevator before she could find her words. Downstairs, Ellie was mid-story about a cartoon. Tyler stood as soon as he saw my face. He didn't ask what happened, but his eyes narrowed like he already knew. I forced a smile for Ellie, told her mommy was still in a meeting and we'd see her soon. She bought it. Tyler didn't. We went to our room. I let them pick dinner. I smiled and laughed and did all the things you're supposed to do when your children are watching. But inside I was unraveling. That moment at the door, it kept replaying in my head like a scene stuck on loop. The voice. The sweatshirt. The way Maggie looked like someone who got caught, not someone who was surprised. The story she fumbled. It was paper-thin and we both knew it. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Ellie slept beside me and Tyler scrolled quietly on his phone in the other bed. I could feel the weight of what I'd seen pressing into my chest like a slow, heavy stone. I didn't have proof, not yet. But I had eyes. And I knew the woman I married. Or I thought I did. Something had shifted and I couldn't unsee it. The only question now was whether I had the strength to find out just how far the cracks went. The next morning, I woke before the sun even had the nerve to show up. Tyler was still asleep, his headphones around his neck, one arm hanging off the bed like he'd fallen asleep mid-thought. Ellie was curled up beside me, still breathing softly, her little hand clutching the sleeve of my shirt. I watched them for a while. I don't know what I was hoping to find in that silence. Clarity, maybe. Strength. But mostly, I just felt empty. That image of Maggie opening the door wouldn't leave my head. Her messy hair, the borrowed sweatshirt, the man's voice still echoing behind her like a bad joke. I kept telling myself maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe I was overreacting. But every time I ran the memory back, it became clearer that I wasn't. And suddenly, everything I'd ignored over the past year came roaring to the surface. At first, it was just a strange feeling. A distance. She had started traveling more for work every couple of months, sometimes every few weeks. Before that, she used to hate work trips. Said hotel pillows gave her neck cramps and she couldn't sleep without her favorite blanket. But recently, she packed like a pro. Left like she was escaping. Then there were the calls. At first, I didn't think anything of them, conference calls, late-night check-ins. But she started stepping out of the room to take them. Said she needed quiet. Once, I walked by the bathroom and heard her laugh, this kind of flirtatious, too comfortable laugh I hadn't heard in years. When she saw me, she said it was just a coworker. I didn't push. And the phone. Always on silent. Always face down. She'd never been secretive about it before. Used to leave it charging on the nightstand. Lately, it was glued to her hand or stuffed in a pocket. Notifications flashed and disappeared before I could even register what they were. If I ever asked, she'd give a vague answer and change the subject. One night, maybe 4 months ago, she said she had a last-minute presentation in Chicago. She left with a carry-on and came back the next evening without it. Claimed the airline lost her luggage. No big deal, she said. But she looked exhausted. She smelled like unfamiliar perfume and she wouldn't meet my eyes. I chalked it up to stress. Yeah? It screamed of something else entirely. Then there was Tyler's birthday. She missed it. Said a client crisis kept her in San Francisco an extra day. She sent a video message apologizing with a cupcake in her hand. Tyler didn't say much. He's never been the type to show emotion, but I caught him deleting the video after watching it once. No reaction. No second play. Looking back, I saw the trail. All the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. It's amazing, really, how much we can ignore when we want to believe in something. I kept telling myself she was just tired, just distracted, just busy. But what she really was gone. I remembered the way she used to rest her head on my shoulder during movies. How we used to talk in bed until one of us fell asleep mid-sentence. That version of Maggie hadn't been around for a long time. I told myself life gets busy. Kids, careers, bills, it takes its toll. But this wasn't just distance. It was erasure. The hardest part wasn't even the lies. It was realizing that I'd been written out of her world a long time ago and never noticed. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, trying not to fall apart. Because the kids were right there. And even if Maggie had burned the whole thing down, I still had 2 people who depended on me not to crumble. I looked over at Tyler. He stirred a little, then opened his eyes, blinking slowly. You good? He asked, voice rough with sleep. Yeah, I lied. Just couldn't sleep. He studied me for a moment. Not the kind of glance a teenager gives a parent out of habit, but the kind that searches, quietly, for the truth behind a mask. Then he nodded once and sat up. Later that morning, we went down for breakfast. Ellie loaded her plate with waffles and strawberries, her mood still untouched by everything swirling around us. Tyler barely touched his eggs. I kept checking the lobby, half expecting Maggie to walk through the revolving door, business casual, all smiles, pretending like nothing had happened. Instead, she texted. A short message. Sorry I missed you. Crazy morning. Can we meet up later today? I stared at the screen for a full minute. No mention of last night. No apology. Just business as usual. I didn't reply. After breakfast, we went to the aquarium. Ellie loved it. She pointed at every stingray like it was magic. Tyler and I lagged behind her, not saying much. I wanted to pretend, just for the day, that everything was normal. That we were just on vacation. But every time I saw another family, I couldn't help wondering if they were whole or just better at hiding the cracks. That night, we ordered room service. Ellie picked the movie. Something animated with talking animals. She curled up between us, giggling at the jokes. Tyler laughed at a few too. I watched them, trying to memorize the way they looked in that moment. Untouched. Still innocent. Because I knew that wouldn't last. After Ellie fell asleep, I stepped out onto the small balcony. The Seattle air was cool, damp, full of distant sounds. Tyler joined me after a few minutes, hands in his sweatshirt pocket. I saw her phone last month, he said suddenly, like he'd been waiting for the right moment. She was texting someone. The name was saved as Claire, but it didn't sound like a woman. I turned to him, but he didn't look at me. Just stared out over the city. I didn't tell you, he continued, because I wasn't sure. And honestly, I didn't want it to be true. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. We both knew. She changed, he added quietly. And not just with you. With Ellie. With me. Like we weren't part of her world anymore. I felt something deep and painful crack inside me. I won't say anything to Ellie, he said. Not yet. I nodded. Thank you. We stood there a while longer. The city moved below us, unaware. Lights flickered in office windows. A train whined in the distance. Life somehow kept going. That night I lay awake again. Only this time I didn't replay the hallway scene. I replayed all the years before it. Every birthday she missed. Every quiet night where I thought she was tired but she was just checked out. Every hug that felt a little too stiff. Every I love you that sounded more like habit than truth. And I realized something that hurt more than all of it. I had already started losing her long before Seattle. This trip didn't break us. It just exposed the break that had been slowly spreading for years. And now that I saw it clearly, I couldn't unsee it. The only thing left was deciding what to do about it. The next morning, I woke up with the weight of everything still pressing against my chest. Ellie was already up, watching cartoons on mute with her legs crossed on the bed, hair sticking out in all directions like a little firework. Tyler was still asleep. Or pretending to be. I didn't blame him. I made an excuse, said I needed to grab coffee, and slipped out of the room while Ellie was busy deciding between syrup or powdered sugar on her French toast. I told myself I was just going to walk. Clear my head. But really, I already knew where I was going. Back to her floor. Back to the door. Back to the scene I hadn't been able to forget. It wasn't like I had a plan. I didn't even know what I was going to say if she opened it again. Maybe I was hoping I'd imagined it all. Maybe I was still clinging to the idea that Maggie would meet me there in a robe, smile sheepishly, say it was all a misunderstanding and somehow make it make sense. I reached the door and stood in front of it for a long time. Then I knocked. Soft at first. Then louder. Footsteps. Then voices too. Muffled by the walls but unmistakably real. A man. Her. Then the sound of a door unlocking. And just like that, I was staring into the face of a shirtless man wearing only a towel, hair still damp from the shower. He blinked at me like I was room service with the wrong tray. Behind him, Maggie appeared. Wearing the t-shirt I had bought her on our 10th anniversary trip to Santa Fe. It was faded now, a little stretched, but I recognized it instantly. I'd spend an hour in that gift shop looking for something she'd actually like. She wore it all the time at home, usually on lazy Sundays when we made pancakes. Seeing her in it here, standing behind this man, in this room that reeked of fresh betrayal, was like watching our history get spit on. Her face collapsed into panic. John, she whispered, like my name alone was a problem she couldn't solve. I didn't respond. I didn't even blink. I just looked at her, then at him, then back again. The guy didn't move. Didn't apologize. He didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. Just stood there like this was all a mild inconvenience. That hurt more than I expected. Maggie, I said quietly. The kids are downstairs. That made her flinch. She took a step forward, suddenly frantic. Wait, John, please, can we just? No, I said. And then I walked away. I heard her call my name, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. My body was already doing everything it could to hold itself together. I knew if I turned around I'd unravel. Right there in the hallway. In front of someone who didn't deserve to see me break. Back in the elevator, I stared at the mirrored doors. My reflection looked like a stranger. Pale. Hollow. Angry in a way I couldn't even begin to describe. I don't remember walking back to the room. I must have passed people. Heard chatter. Smelled coffee. But it all blurred into background noise. When I got inside, Ellie was playing with her crayons. Tyler was dressed and tying his shoes. He looked up at me, saw my face, and didn't ask a single question. She said she'd meet us for lunch, I lied, sitting down on the edge of the bed. Ellie nodded like that made perfect sense. Can we go to the market after? She asked. Sure, I said. Whatever you want. She smiled and went back to her drawing. Later that morning, I sat outside the coffee shop across the street from the hotel while the kids browsed a nearby bookstore. I stared into my cup, steam rising into the chilly air. I didn't drink it. My hands were still shaking. How had it come to this? How had the woman I built my life around, a woman I laughed with, raised children with, confided in, become someone who could look me in the eye and lie without blinking? And how had I let it go this far? I thought back to all the nights she came home late with stories that didn't quite add up. All the trips that suddenly extended by a day. All the times I asked if she was okay and she smiled and said, just tired. She hadn't been tired. She'd been elsewhere. With someone else. And now I had seen him. I didn't even know his name. I didn't care. But I knew one thing, she had told him she was divorced. I only found that out later when a colleague of hers, someone I had met a few times at company picnics, quietly reached out to me. I guess word got around fast that I had been in Seattle. He said he thought I should know. She's been bringing him around for a while, the guy told me. Told everyone she was living apart from her ex. I had no idea you two were still married. I couldn't respond to that either. She had erased me before I even knew I was being edited out. Back at the hotel, I sat with the kids in the lobby cafe, watching Ellie sip her hot chocolate and excitedly point at pastries she wanted to try. Tyler just stared at the back of his phone. Maggie walked in about an hour later, dressed for work, hair blown out, makeup perfect. Like she hadn't been caught with another man in a hotel room just that morning. Like this was just another Tuesday. She saw Ellie first and Ellie saw her. Mommy, she squealed, hopping off her seat and running into her arms. Maggie bent down and hugged her tightly, whispering something I couldn't hear. Tyler stood next to me, arms folded. He didn't say a word. Maggie glanced up at me, but I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the moment passed. She kissed Ellie on the head and said she'd catch up later, then walked off. Just like that. Gone. That night, she sent a text. Can we talk? I didn't answer. She sent another. I want to explain. Please. Still nothing from me. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply button, but what could she say that would fix it? That it didn't mean anything? That she was confused? No explanation changes what I saw. No excuse changes the fact that our daughter was downstairs while her mother played house with a stranger. There's a point in every story where denial dies. Where hope steps aside and reality sits down at the table. I had reached that point, and the truth was no longer vague. It had a face, a towel, and my wife. That night, I lay awake in the dark, the soft hum of the hotel air conditioner filling the silence. Ellie was curled up next to me, breathing slow and even, one small hand resting against my chest. Tyler was in the next bed, eyes closed, but I could tell he wasn't sleeping. He hadn't said a word since dinner. There's a kind of loneliness that settles in when you're surrounded by people you love, but you still feel completely alone. I felt it then, like a knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. Maggie hadn't tried to call again. Just those 2 texts, hours earlier, left unanswered on my screen like pieces of a conversation I didn't have the energy to start. She was staying quiet now, maybe hoping I'd cool off. Maybe pretending the kids' presence gave her some moral ground to stand on. But she knew better. She knew what I'd seen. The next morning, Ellie woke up chipper and full of questions. Are we seeing Mommy today? I nodded. She said she'd meet us after her meeting. Ellie smiled and reached for her stuffed fox. Can we go to that place with the big hot dogs again? Sure. I hated how easily the lie came. Hated more that it was necessary. Tyler sat on the edge of his bed, pulling on his hoodie. He looked at me over his shoulder, his face blank. She's gonna pretend like nothing happened, he said flatly. I know. You gonna let her? I looked at him for a long moment. Just for a little while, I said. For Ellie. He nodded. Said nothing more. He understood. We met Maggie outside the museum around noon. She arrived exactly on time, dressed like every other mom in the crowd, jeans, sneakers, windbreaker. Smiling. Put together. The kind of outfit that said, look, I'm still involved. Still here? Ellie ran to her like it was Christmas morning. Maggie picked her up and spun her around, laughing just a little too loudly. People around us glanced over, smiling at the happy reunion. They didn't see the quiet storm beneath it. Tyler stayed beside me. I glanced down at him, hands stuffed into his sweatshirt pocket, jaw tight. I put a hand on his shoulder. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean into it either. Hey, sweetheart, Maggie said to me with a nervous smile. I nodded once. Hi. She looked down. Thanks for bringing them. We needed a trip, I said. Felt like a good time. She opened her mouth to respond, but Ellie tugged on her sleeve. Can we go see the butterfly garden now? Daddy says it's in a big glass house. Of course, honey, Maggie said. Let's go. We walked through the exhibits in silence. Ellie darted from display to display, awestruck. She loved anything with movement, fluttering wings, glowing jellyfish, mechanical exhibits with buttons she could press. I watched her more than anything else. Every time she turned to show me something, I smiled like everything was okay. But inside, I was unraveling. At one point, I looked over and saw Maggie watching me. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just watched. Like maybe she could still read me. Like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. After the museum, we stopped by a food truck park for lunch. Ellie devoured a giant pretzel and some fresh lemonade. Tyler picked at fries. Maggie got a wrap and barely touched it. We sat at a picnic table under a string of overhead lights, pretending we were still a family. How's work been? She asked, too casually. I gave her a look. Busy. You know how it is. She nodded slowly. I do. That was it. That was the whole conversation. Later that evening, back at the hotel, Ellie was still buzzing with energy. We stayed in. Ordered room service. Watched a movie. She insisted on sitting between Tyler and me, wrapped in a hotel blanket like a little queen. Every so often, she'd look up and say, "This is the best trip ever." I smiled every time. It felt like a punch to the gut. Around 9 o'clock, Maggie texted again. I'd like to talk. Without the kids. Can we meet after they're asleep? I stared at the message for a while. Then replied. Outside. 9:30, side entrance. Tyler watched me type. Didn't say a word. At 9:30, I slipped out of the room, careful not to wake Ellie. She was snoring softly, one arm flung across the bed like she'd claimed it. Tyler was still up, earbuds in, but I could tell he was listening. Maggie was already waiting at the side entrance. She stood by the bike rack, arms folded, hair tucked into her jacket like she was trying to look smaller. Thanks for meeting me, she said. I didn't respond. She glanced around. I guess I should start with. I'm sorry. Are you? Her eyes filled with tears instantly, but I felt nothing. Just cold. I didn't mean for you to find out like that, she said. You mean you didn't mean for me to find out at all? She winced. I stepped closer. How long, Maggie? She swallowed hard. Since April. I did the math in my head. That's 7 months. She nodded. That's longer than you gave me when we started dating, I said. Do you even hear yourself? I never wanted to hurt you. You did it anyway. I didn't plan it, she whispered. It started on that trip to LA. He was there. We talked. One night turned into more, and I didn't stop it. So you let it happen? Yes, she said. I let it happen. We stood in silence for a moment, the city buzzing quietly behind us. And the kids? I asked. Were they just background noise to your little getaway? Her voice cracked. I never stopped loving them. I shook my head. Don't use that word so casually. I didn't bring him around them. I swear. I laughed bitterly. They were in the same building. I didn't think. No, Maggie. You didn't think. You hid. And lied. And now you want to talk about mistakes like it's a math problem. I was lonely, John, she said, as if that explained everything. So was I said. Difference is I didn't cheat. She didn't have a response to that. She wiped her eyes. I want to try. I want to fix this. Therapy. Anything. I'll stop seeing him. I already told him it's over. I shook my head. You don't get to come clean because you got caught and expect a reset. I don't want to lose my family, she whispered. You already did. We stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking. Finally, I turned to go. I'm doing this for the kids now, I said. Not for us. There's no more us. I walked away before she could say anything else. Back in the room, Tyler was still up. He looked at me when I came in. Not with curiosity. Just clarity. She say anything worth hearing? He asked. No, I said. He nodded. Put his headphones back in. I looked over at Ellie, sleeping peacefully in a tangle of pillows. I walked over, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "You're safe. I promise." And I meant it. No matter what Maggie did, Ellie wasn't going to carry the weight of her mother's choices. Neither of them would. I would. Because that's what fathers do. Even when everything else falls apart. We didn't leave the hotel until late the next morning. Ellie had begged for pancakes in bed, and honestly, I didn't need convincing. She was still in that magical phase where waffles with whipped cream and cartoons on TV could make the world feel whole again. I envied that simplicity. The way she could be completely in the moment, untouched by the storm quietly churning just outside her view. Maggie had texted once. Just once. "Please don't shut me out. For the kids' sake." I read it twice and then deleted it. For the kids' sake? That was my entire reason for not blowing this whole thing sky high already. If it weren't for Tyler and Ellie, I would have packed our bags and left Seattle the same night I opened that door. But I couldn't take Ellie away from her without warning. I couldn't risk breaking her heart before she even understood what was happening. She still saw her mom as a hero. A constant. I wasn't ready to shatter that for her. But Tyler? Tyler already knew. We went down to the waterfront that afternoon. Ellie wanted to see the boats, so we walked the piers, cold wind brushing off the bay, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. She ran ahead, stopping to watch a harbor seal pop its head above the water. I stayed back with Tyler, who walked beside me with his hands deep in his hoodie pocket, eyes on the horizon. For a while, we didn't speak. Just walked. The sound of waves and gulls filled the space where words didn't go. Then finally he said it. "I've known for a while." I stopped walking. He didn't. "I didn't know everything," he continued. "But I knew something was wrong. Something real." He glanced over at me. "The way she talks to you," he said. "Or doesn't talk to you. The way she disappears for whole weekends and comes back acting like nothing happened. I figured it out a long time ago. I just didn't want to believe it." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. "You remember that night she missed my birthday?" he asked. "She said it was a work emergency in San Francisco, but she FaceTimed us from a hotel room in San Diego." I blinked. "You sure?" "There was a brochure on the table behind her," he said. "I Googled it after the call." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't say anything." He shrugged. "What was I gonna say? Hey Dad, I think Mom's lying and cheating on you?" I thought maybe I was wrong. Or that it would stop. I looked at him, my son suddenly seeming older than 16. Taller. Sharper. He had grown up so fast, and I hadn't noticed just how much until now. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry you've had to carry that." He gave a dry laugh. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong." We sat on a bench near the water. Ellie was still nearby, fascinated by the ferries pulling into dock. "I don't hate her," Tyler said quietly. "But I don't know if I can ever respect her again." "You don't have to decide that now," I told him. "This isn't something we're going to solve overnight." He nodded, but I could see in his eyes that he'd already made up his mind. "I don't think she even sees what she's done," he said. "I mean really sees it." "I'm not sure she does either," I admitted. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Are you gonna tell Ellie?" I was quiet for a moment. "I don't know how to," I said. "She still thinks this is just a fun trip. She thinks her mom's doing important work and meeting us when she can." Tyler turned to look at me. "Then let her think that. At least for now." "You sure?" "She doesn't need this in her head," he said. "Not yet." I nodded slowly. "Okay." We sat there for a while longer, watching the water. Ellie eventually wandered back, her cheeks red from the wind, holding a little toy sailboat she'd convinced me to buy from a pierside vendor. "Look," she said, holding it up. "It has real string." "Nice pick," Tyler said, forcing a smile. She grinned, proud of herself. That night, we stayed in again. I let Ellie pick the movie, something animated with dancing animals. Tyler and I barely watched, but she loved every second of it. After she fell asleep, Tyler went to brush his teeth, and I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. It was Maggie again. "I know you don't want to hear from me, but I want to fix this. Please just give me a chance." I stared at the message. There was a time I would have replied. A time I would have tried to patch things together. But that time had passed. I put the phone face down. When Tyler came out of the bathroom, he looked at me, then at the phone. "She's still trying?" "Yeah." "You gonna meet her again?" "Maybe. I don't know." He nodded. "Just don't let her guilt you into staying together." I looked at him, really looked. He had Maggie's eyes, my jawline. He was becoming a man faster than I was ready for. I won't, I said. I promise. He paused by the bed, then said, you know. I think we're gonna be okay. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah? He nodded. Yeah. You, me, and Ellie. We're not broken. That hit me harder than anything Maggie had said all week. I smiled for real this time. Thanks. He climbed into bed and turned away, but I could tell he felt better after saying it. And maybe he was right. Maybe we were going to be okay. Even without her. Maybe especially without her. When we got back to the hotel that evening, Maggie was standing outside our room. She looked nervous, arms folded, pacing lightly like someone rehearsing lines. Tyler saw her first and slowed his pace. I stepped in front of Ellie instinctively, more out of reflex than fear. Can we talk? Maggie asked. I looked at Tyler. He nodded slightly and guided Ellie inside. Once the door closed, she launched in. I know you don't owe me anything, she said, but I want to be honest. Completely. I didn't stop her. She told me it started with a trip to Los Angeles. Drinks after meetings. Confiding in someone who understood her better. Then came texts. Calls. Hotels. It wasn't one mistake, it was months of them. Not just this guy either. There had been another. Brief, she claimed. A blur. She cried, but the tears didn't feel like grief. They felt like desperation. I was scared, she said. I felt invisible at home. Like I was just filling a role. I didn't know how to talk to you. And you never thought to try? I asked. Before deciding to burn everything down? I thought it would pass, she whispered. I thought I could fix myself quietly. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. 3 weeks later, we signed the papers. It wasn't messy, just cold. Efficient. She moved into an apartment across town. Tyler chose not to see her. Ellie struggled more, asking every few days when Mommy was coming home. I gave her answers that wouldn't hurt, even if they weren't fully true. I wasn't going to poison her image of her mom, not yet. Life would do that in its own time. At first, the silence in our house was unbearable. Then it started to feel like breathing. Tyler became more open. He helped with Ellie, cracked jokes at dinner, even started drawing again. I found myself waking up earlier, feeling lighter. Not happy, not yet, but capable of moving forward. One night, we sat on the porch, Tyler reading, Ellie playing with the dog. The sky was turning that soft orange it gets in early fall. I looked at them and realized we were still a family. Not the one we had before, but something honest. Something healing. There were no more lies. No more pretending. Just me and my kids. And that finally was enough.